Good evening, guys. My name is David. Tonight my topic is performance-enhancing drugs. For years, there's been an ongoing dispute in the sports world as to whether or not performance-enhancing drugs, such as steroids, should be accepted in sports. Advocates for it, such as Bennett Foddy, a PhD in bioethics at Princeton University, states in his book, Principles of Healthcare Ethics, it would be much easier to eliminate the anti-doping rules rather than to eliminate doping. The current policy against doping has proved expensive and difficult to police. In the near future, it may become impossible to police. And because doping is illegal, the pressure is to make performance enhancers undetectable rather than safe. Now, I'm not arguing that the policy on performance enhancing drugs is the correct policy. I'm simply stating that the use of performance enhancing drugs ends the careers of professional athletes. For two main reasons. There is an unwanted pressure on athletes to use PEDs, and the use of PEDs has a negative impact on the health of athletes. So advocates like Bennett Foddy have argued that no one is forcing these athletes to take these drugs. However, there's still an underlying pressure to use PEDs in sports. So consider this. According to a survey of 350 males ages 18 to 25, conducted by the group Digital Citizens Alliance, found that over 40% believed that the use of PEDs in pro sports suggested that using PEDs was the only way to make it professionally or enhance their athletic performance. This type of pressure to perform at these high levels exerts a powerful effect on athletes to take PEDs undetected and to risk their careers. One example, Marion Jones, a former Olympic track star, arguably one of the greatest female track and field stars, took PEDs prior to the 2000 Summer Olympics. The Summer Olympics in which she won 3 gold medals and 2 bronze medals. And for years after, she denied allegations that she took steroids until in 2007, she admitted to the Washington Post that she did in fact take steroids. This decision would cost her her career, cost her to be stripped of all those medals, and cost her to serve a 6-month prison term for lying to federal agents. Another example, in 2009, Alex Rodriguez, a third baseman for the New York Yankees, admitted to taking steroids. And in an interview with Peter Gammons of ESPN, when asked the reasoning for taking the steroids, he responded, "When I arrived in Texas in 2001, I felt an enormous amount of pressure. I felt like I had all the weight of the world on top of me, and I needed to perform at a high level every day. I was young, I was stupid, and I was naive, and I wanted to prove to everyone that, I was worth being one of the greatest players of all time. And I did take a banned substance, and for that, I'm very sorry and deeply regretful." Now, aside the unwanted pressure, PEDs also cause a negative impact to the health of pro athletes. Studies by the U.S. Anti-Doping Agency found that stimulants, which are used to boost an athlete's energy levels, can cause insomnia, anxiety, and increased heart rate and blood pressure. They also found that anabolic steroids, the most commonly used PED, have been known to cause liver damage and heart problems amongst its users. For example, Ken Caminiti, a former Major League Baseball player for the San Diego Padres, admitted to Sports Illustrated in 2002 in an article titled, "Caminiti Comes Clean," that he used steroids in his 1996 National League MVP season. He died 2 years later in 2004 of a heart attack at the age of 41. The New York medical examiner determined that the steroids he took were a major factor in his death. Opioids, drugs that are used to overcome pain, commonly used by NFL players after taking vicious hits, have been known to cause addiction and overdose. Former NFL quarterback Ray Lucas was a victim of opioid addiction and overdose. In an article written by Ryan Joslow, the CBS News health editor, Lucas admitted to taking up to 800 prescription painkillers a month at his worst, a decision that would cost him his career and put his family through what he called hell on earth. So to summarize, the high-risk health factors and the unnecessary burden to use PEDs makes the use of them detrimental to the careers of pro athletes. Thank you.
Right, well, I thought you did a nice job at the beginning trying to demonstrate a controversy by the use of the quote talking about how it would be easier to get rid of the rules than it is to get rid of the performance-enhancing drugs. I thought that there's a little bit of an explanation there. I don't know how widespread the notion is that people ought to be able to do these things or that they're necessary to do given that there are substantial rules against it and that the primary motivations are for the health of the athletes. The issue that you've got here is not the most controversial part of the subject. There might be some question about whether or not some other approach would be more effective, whether the current approach is ineffective, something along those lines. I think that might be a little bit more where there's some controversy on the argument. You did preview the supporting points, suggesting that there's a lot of pressure to utilize these performance-enhancing drugs and that the use of these drugs has negative effects. Well, the pressure thing, I think you've got good examples there that demonstrate that there is pressure. Anybody who's using a performance-enhancing drug obviously feels a need to be competitive, and that's the way that they do it. How great that pressure is, I don't know that it's ever measurable, but the idea that everybody else is doing it, therefore you need to do it, I think is kind of one of those things that would motivate a little bit more, and I think if you could show that people operate under that assumption more, then your argument would be a little bit stronger. The notion that there are harmful consequences, there's certainly some harmful consequences to the people who get caught. Marion Jones to her career, Ken Caminetti, who you mentioned, who died of a heart attack, but outside of those folks, you got and Ray Lucas, those three examples, I don't know how typical those kinds of problems are. Are there people who've used these kinds of performance-enhancing drugs and had none of these negative effects, or do they all have those negative effects? Does it always lead to these particular outcomes? I think there's some probability arguments that need to be included there to strengthen that. But you did a good job citing the sources for the most part. You presented a variety of information. You had lots of examples and factual data. You had a couple of pieces of testimony, a little bit of statistical information. So I think that you were trying to make the argument there. I just think you could probably make it a little bit more compelling. So the sufficiency issue is the thing that I'm a little concerned about. All right, thank you.